We are on a beautiful February day here in California, although I know in the rest of the country it is not as nice as it is here. Welcome to our afternoon tea light. We are here today with Libbie Grant, aka Libbie Hawker, aka Olivia Hawker. You guys might have seen her books around. She's also been at the Historical Novel Society conference. So if you guys tuned into that, you would have seen her name there. She's also the author of many, many books. And I am going to read off what her bio is here. Libbie Grant is an American author of historical and literary fiction. Under her pen name Olivia Hawker, she is a Washington Post best-selling author of One for the Blackbird, One for the Crow, a finalist for the Washington State Book Award and the Willa Literary Award for Historical Fiction, and the Ragged Edge of Night. Her literary and upmarket historical fiction is characterized by rich, immersive description and complex characters. She resides in the San Juan Islands of Washington State with her husband, Paul, and several naughty cats. So I hope you guys are on here. Oh, hey, I see Linda. Hi, you guys. I want to let you know that if you would like to talk to us, you are more than welcome to put questions in the chat. We will ask Libby as we go. And if you want to identify yourself so I can see who you are, just follow that link right there. And that way they show up here, so you can chat with us as you'd like to go. All right, let's welcome Libby. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you.
Absolutely, really glad we could chat. So you have done a lot. You've published a lot of books.
Yes, I have.
How many total are we talking here?
Well, including some in many other genres under many other pen names from like my super early days of writing when I was just trying to like make anything stick so I could write for a living. I have a total of 41 books out. I'm working on my 42nd right now, so it's a lot. Yes,
it's a lot.
That's as many years as I've been alive.
Goodness. So we have here, these are your books that I found under Libbie Hawker. So, you know, no big whoop there. And then we have these under Olivia Hawker. And then now there is Prophet's Rights under Libbie Grant. So yes. With all of these different pen names and all these different genres that you're working at, have you always been in historical something, or has it been a little more scattershot than that?
Oh, it's been more scattershot for sure. I've done a lot of other stuff as well. Just like I said before, just, you know, in my early days, I was just treading water and trying to keep my head above the waterline so I could write for a living. So I've written some romance in the past. I've written some like urban fantasy, all under different pen names, just trying to find where I would fit into the market. But really my historical fiction was the most popular with readers, which made me happy because it's what I like writing the most. So I was really glad. That's probably part of why it probably sort of came through that I was really into the historical stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, fortunately that's what stuck. And so that's what I've been doing since then. And Libbie Hawker is the pen name I used for my self-published stuff. That turned into Olivia Hawker, which is a pen name I do specifically for one publisher, for Lake Union Publishing. And Libbie Grant is my real name, so I finally get to publish something under my real name because I've kind of got my career headed in the direction I want it to go, knock on wood. And yeah, so it's exciting to have a book coming out under my real name after so long and so many books.
I can't even imagine. I mean, this is my pen name, so I can't even imagine how, like, what a shift that must be, which is awesome. I mean, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, you know, for a lot of us, it does take that long to build a career in writing.
Yes, it does.
This is a hard business to be in. For sure.
It can be very hard, yeah. And, you know, it always makes news when somebody hits it big on their debut novel, and that's always so exciting, and we're always so happy for authors who manage to do that. But I think it's probably more common that most professional writers have an experience like mine, where you're just like, whatever, I'll write anything. Just give me something to write. If it pays, I'll write it.
Yeah, exactly. So do you have any insight in what it's like for the different paths of publishing? Like, do you like the I mean, Lake Union is through Amazon, so it's not really indie, but I guess it like compared to HarperCollins, which is what?
Well, no, surprisingly, the experience is basically the same between working with an Amazon publishing imprint and any other imprint. It's the same editorial process, same high standards. The only thing that's really different is that their distribution is a little bit different, where they pretty much distribute exclusively on Amazon, which is not a bad thing because now about 85% of book sales take place on Amazon anyway. So it's still like, yeah, so it doesn't hurt much to do it that way, but it's just the distribution model is a little different. But from the author's perspective, the experience is very comparable. There's almost nothing different about working with like Lake Union or working with HarperCollins. So yeah, I have some perspective on that. And then I also have self-published a lot of books too. And in fact, that's actually how I got started. I got to the point where I was able to quit my day job and write full time and even buy a house just from self-publishing alone.
Wow.
And then I transitioned from there into working with traditional publishers. So yeah, I do. I feel very fortunate in that regard. I have a lot of perspective on all the different paths of publishing, and I like them all. They all have their different pros and cons, and sometimes a particular book is right for self-publishing or for working with a traditional publisher, and sometimes it's not. And I feel fortunate that I have all those options open to me, so that kind of no matter what I write, I can find the right home for it. So that's a good thing.
Well, I'm really curious, like what would you say is a book that would be better suited for self-publishing as opposed to
as opposed to a traditional publisher? Series books do great with self-publishing, and for whatever reason, publishers do not appear to know how to handle series intelligently at all, or at least in historical fiction they don't. It may be a different story in other genres, but they're not great with series. Series can be very lucrative and very they can be the sort of the bedrock of a stable publishing career if you self-publish them and manage them correctly. And that's exactly how I built my career, was on self-published series books. And then I worked that out from there to standalones with traditional publishers. So, yeah.
Well, I'm going to bring up the Libbie Hawker graphic you have.
So there are.
Yeah, so many. So it looks like you have the Sekhmet Bed, that series. And then you had the series that's the, oh man, I've cut off some of them, so you can't really, the Mercer Girls series, it looks like was one.
Yep. I have 3 separate series set in ancient Egypt. Those were definitely my mainstay early on. There were not many books set in ancient Egypt coming out from any direction, but readers really liked them. So I was like, fine, I can write ancient Egyptian books forever, or so I thought at the time. I got to 10 books in 3 series, and I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm so sick of ancient Egypt. I needed a change at that point, but 10 books isn't bad. That's a solid foundation to build a career on. So yeah,
absolutely. Well, and it looks like you kind of shifted over because I know that. So these are mostly like the West-ish, not like but
yeah.
Not.
So those are my Olivia Hawker books that I do for Lake Union. So I started with one, The Ragged Edge of Night, which is set in World War II Germany. And then I did one for the Blackbird, one for the Crow, which is like late 19th century American frontier. And then The Rise of Light is still in the West, same general region as Blackbird, but it's 1975. So very different, about 100 years later.
So do you have any like research things that you do specifically? Because I mean, that's a pretty broad thing. I mean, so, to go from 10 books set in the same time period, so you don't have to like relearn the customs and the things like that, to then jump into World War II, to jump to the West, like that's a big shift.
Yeah, it was definitely a huge shift. But by that time I kind of welcomed it, because I was just so sick of ancient Egypt. I was like, anything else would be welcome at this point. So yeah, I really threw myself into researching just to broaden my horizons a little bit and give myself a change of scenery. It was like having the grimmest vacation in the world to go from ancient Egypt to researching World War II Germany. Not a pleasant setting at all. But it was a nice change, like it gave me something different to think about. It gave me a different approach to my writing and a different perspective. And it was a nice challenge. I really liked the professional challenge of shifting my setting that dramatically. It was good.
Oh, we have a comment here. Mikal says, I'm surprised to hear that traditional publishers don't know how to handle fic series. I thought publishers wanted series for the reasons that you said. So that's really interesting. Do you think they're just mishandling the back catalog of the series?
From what I have seen recently, like over the last 5 years of working with traditional publishers, they do not want series. They specifically do not want series. That may be different for like some of the smaller presses, or some of the boutique publishers might actually find them easier to handle and easier to promote and to manage correctly. So smaller publishers, like independent publishers, might actually be into series, and if they are, great, go for it. But the bigger publishers are like very series averse right now. They're like, get away.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's just because historically they haven't done well for them, so now they've just decided that they're all toxic, which is not true at all. But honestly, that's a good thing for writers, because series make way more money if you self-publish them. Way more money. So
that's good for me, because I self-publish my own historical romances. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I wonder if that's different too, because historical romances, even when it's traditionally published, seem to always be in a series. A short one, 3 to 4 books. But
yeah, but romance works a little differently from like the mainstream historical market. So
yeah, it does. That's true. That's true. Well, so after all of these things, and you've also written a how-to book, Take Off Your Pants, outline your books faster for faster, better writing. So yes. I took your Take Off Your Pants, the Historical Novel Society conference, and it was really lovely. It was really very helpful.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I ended up finishing up my 3rd book. I was really foundering just because COVID. I had long COVID last year, and I was just having a really hard time writing because my brain was just a fog. Yeah. So I was just really stuck, and now the book is coming out March 1st, which is the same time your book is coming out.
Yay! We're release twins.
Yeah. Oh, we've got Margaret here, Margaret Bernard. She says, I have Take Off Your Pants and I need to read it.
I've heard it's useful.
So out of all of these books, which one is your favorite? Do you have like a favorite child out of all of them?
I do. My favorite child is The Prophet's Wife, which is the one that's coming out on March 1st.
I got the chance to read The Prophet's Wife. I finished it a few days ago, and you guys in the audience, just to let you know that I have already shared with Libby that it haunted me. So if you have a chance, I highly recommend picking it up. It comes out March 1st. It is the story of Joseph Smith's first wife, Emma Hale. I'm not a Mormon. I'm not really that aware of Mormon history. I know the basics. Emma was married to Joseph prior to the Golden Plates. So, and this novel is from her perspective. And I also saw in your author notes at the end of the book that it took you 7 years to write this book.
Yeah, I didn't work on it for 7 years straight, but I first got the idea for it back in 2013, and I finished it in 2020. Yeah, and I worked on it on and off between that time. I had kind of a rough. I had a complete synopsis done for the whole book, and I had like the first several chapters written, and I tried to sell it to my publisher, Lake Union. After my first couple of books with them came out under Libbie Hawker, I pitched it, and they were really enthusiastic about it. But when they took it to the acquisitions meeting, the marketing department shot them down, because the way marketing works through Amazon publishing imprints, they use algorithms on Amazon to sell books, and they were like, look, this book is going to just get automatically pushed by the algorithm to people who have bought like LDS interest books, to like Mormons, and they're not gonna like this book. So we can't do it. We literally don't know how to market this book. And I was like, oh, that's a bummer, but I understand. And then I was like, maybe I'll self-publish it, whatever. So I sat on it for a couple more years, And after a while, I started doing the Olivia Hawker pen name with Lake Union, and they had kind of changed some of their marketing approaches by then. So I was like, hey, do you guys want to reconsider this book that I have? And again, they turned it down at that time for, I don't know, some other reason. So I was like, all right, it's just not meant to be with them. So whatever. So I just kept it for another couple of years, and I still was totally on the fence. Like, should I self-publish it? Should I not? What should I do with it? And then one day, it was like the summer of 2019. I don't even know what I was doing. I was out in my garden or something, and it just like came into my head that I should go to a writing conference in person where there were going to be big agents, and I should enter the writing contest at that conference with that book. And then I should leverage that to get an agent and sell it to the big five. And I was like, wow, I've never tried to sell anything to the big five before. I've been working on agented all this time. Like, do I really want to do that? But I have this policy that if an idea comes out of nowhere and smacks me in the head, I follow that idea because it's always good. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. So I did. I went to the Pacific Northwest Writers Association conference. I entered this book in the contest there, in the unpublished manuscript contest. There were 700 other entries. And because this idea exploded out of nowhere and smacked me in the head, and I always follow those ideas, I was not surprised when I found out shortly before the conference that it was one of the finalists. So I got to walk around the conference with this thing on my badge that said finalist. And that helped me to get a couple of audiences with some agents, and I pitched it. And the very first agent who I pitched it to seemed enthralled when I told her this, first of all, I told her about my career. I'm like, here's who I am. I'm already a bestseller. This is what I've done. And then I said, here's my book. It was a finalist. If you're interested, great. She was like, that sounds really cool. I was like, fantastic. Well, I'm going to go pitch to some more agents. I'll see you around. I went and got in line for another agent, and my phone pinged. And I picked it up and looked, and this agent had texted me because I had left my contact information on this little sheet I gave her. This agent had texted me while I was standing in line to it with another agent. She was like, I want that book. I want it. And I was like, okay. I was like, this is my agent. If she's listening to some other poor author pitching to her and she's texting me telling me she wants my book, I was like, well, I better do that.
Yeah.
So I did with Carolyn Ford. I signed with her after the conference, and then COVID hit. So we didn't get around to trying to sell the book until like the summer of 2020. But yeah, we had a very successful venture with it. As soon as we took it out on sale, we got a lot of enthusiastic interest in it. Sold it to William Morrow, to Tessa Woodward, who is behind some of the biggest bestsellers in historical fiction lately. So I don't know if this is going to be one too, but knock on wood again, maybe it will. I'm excited to see how it does when it comes out. So we'll see.
Margaret says that it was almost like that big idea got up and smacked the agent in the head too.
Yeah, it might have been a little bit like that.
Well, I gotta say, so from my own personal perspective here, I am not a particularly religious person, so it was very interesting to read Emma's perspective because that time period, the early 1800s, it starts out in Pennsylvania. And it is an area of big spiritual revivals, like different groups are coming in and different preachers, revival tents, like all of those things that I think most Americans have a picture of in their heads. So it almost isn't surprising from a reader perspective that this is kind of, we know going in anyway, right? Because it's Joseph Smith and something, but it was interesting to see her doubt that goes through. And there were almost times when she believes him that I wanted to shake her. Because I don't want to give anybody any spoilers here, but I ended that book a little mad. I did. I ended the book pretty angry at not at her, but yeah, I
just at everything.
Basically everything.
Yeah.
As the kids say, he did her dirty.
Yeah, he did her dirty. And it's a complex story with a lot of moving parts to it. And there was so much I had to leave out too, like so much of this history that I just could not cram into a novel. There's just so much stuff in there. So I really had to pare it down to kind of the essence of what happened to Emma. Like I really kept it focused on her direct experiences, just to try to keep it within a reason. It's still a doorstopper. It's 175,000 words. And that's the short version. When we sold this book to William Morrow, it was 200,000 words, which, as I'm sure all the authors out there know, is about 100,000 words longer than publishers expect to see. So
Yeah.
it was like twice the size of what a book is supposed to be, but I was like, I don't think I can get it smaller than this without like a professional editor telling me what I should cut, you know?
I
So
mean,
we did get down to 175.
1,000 words.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's long, but I write long books. Like that's what I've built my whole career on. Like Blackbird, which is one of my best-selling books ever, is 185,000, so it's longer than The Prophet's Wife. But I write long. That's my thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a long book, and still like I had to leave out a lot and still try to make it make sense for Emma, you know, because it's so focused on her experience, her feelings, and her perspective on all of this stuff that's going on. And it is such a complex, just wild history. There are so many moving parts to it. It touches on so many other things that were happening all across America right then, like abolition and the lead up to the Civil War, and like all these other conflicts that don't appear to affect the Mormon community directly, and yet they do still affect it and like shove everything in this terrible direction towards the precipice of this cliff. And you just are watching as this whole community goes like towards this cliff, and you're like, no, stop! And they don't stop. It's wild.
Well, sorry, I just want to make sure I share everybody's comments here. Start following the ideas that smack you in the head. Yep.
I recommend it, yes.
But I think that was one of the reasons why the end of the book hit me so hard, is because we are so deep in Emma's perspective that we don't know anything unless Emma knows it. And by the end of that, I mean, there is so much that she doesn't know, because there is so much that is happening in secret, specifically because they know it's going to piss her off.
Yeah, the men end up keeping a lot of things from her, and the way she finds out about these things sometimes kind of heartbreaking. So yeah, it was tough. I really felt for her as I was writing it and I was just doing all the research. I was just like, man, what a position to be in, you know, to have all this stuff going on around you and just being desperate to keep your children safe in this environment. Like, that's a lot.
Well, and that's kind of what I basically ended up thinking about it, is that this is a woman who, because of her background, because of her faith, because of all these different things, is willing to do, as I think most mothers are, willing to do whatever it takes to keep her babies alive. Whatever it is, doesn't matter. She will just do whatever it needs to happen. Sorry, we've got another comment here of her story is heartbreaking even after Joseph dies.
Yes, it is. She endured a lot.
Yeah.
One of the most resilient women I've ever encountered in history. And somehow, like, especially even after Joseph dies, which I don't go into in the book, the story kind of ends in my novel close to the time of Joseph's death. But like, even like in her later life, you can see how compassionate she was. Like, her second husband ended up cheating on her and getting some other woman pregnant, and she took in that child to raise because he needed a home. So she was like, great, you're my kid now. I'm raising you. I mean, she was just like just had this bottomless well of compassion and put up with so much crap from everyone. I'm amazed by Emma Hale Smith. She was an incredible woman.
Wow. Well, and so it made sense that you wanted to write this book about her, since we always talk about strong women, but I do think that when we talk about strength, as pop culture strength, we often have a really narrow view of what that is. But I agree with you. Like, Emma really shows strength in her resilience. Like, that's, you know, how she manages to get through so much. It's just because she just won't stop.
Yeah, I've seen a few people now who've read the book early and who've done advanced reviews on it have kind of commented on that idea that this depiction of Emma is not the type of strong woman we usually see in fiction, and that the readers liked that. And I was very gratified by that, because I didn't I didn't want to make her a stereotype of what it means to be a strong woman. I didn't want to make her like the modern pop culture equivalent of that. I wanted to show her humanity, how sometimes like we're forced to be strong, you know, men or women, whoever you are. Sometimes we're forced to be strong when we would rather not be, but we just don't have an option other than to just endure whatever we're going through. And that's very much the position she's in, where she's like, I just gotta get through this, so I'm gonna get through it, whatever it takes. So yeah.
Yeah.
But
Wow. Someone here says, Facebook user. I don't know who it is. So, how do you explain Joseph's charisma?
well, that's a fascinating question, because how do you explain a charismatic person's hold over people? It means different things to different people depending on how they relate to that person. You know, Joseph in my novel is an entirely human person. There's nothing supernatural about him, and yet he also is very sincere in his experiences. Like, he genuinely believes, or at least he tells everyone that he genuinely believes that he had these visions and these experiences. They are very real to him, or he steadfastly represents to everyone that they are very real to him. So other people around him have to either decide, is he lying or is he for real about this? And it very much shifts the idea of who is Joseph Smith and how do you handle him onto the people around him. So it sort of, it takes, I don't take a stance as an author about who he was as a person. I just present, here he is, and here he is talking to people about these experiences he says he had, and here's how the people react to it, including Emma. So I found that to be kind of the most honest way to deal with Joseph as a character, because, you know, I was raised in the LDS faith. I was raised Mormon. My family roots go all the way back to Fayette, New York. I mean, the founding of the church, the earliest version of the Mormon church, almost the earliest version. My ancestors were there, and my family's been in it this whole time. So I grew up with a very particular image of Joseph Smith, and understanding the reverence that people in this culture have for him. And yet I'm no longer a member of the church, so draw from that whatever conclusion you will. But I wanted to represent him in the way that I truly think he was, which was as a very sincere person who had strong motivations of his own for what he was doing that were not malignant in any way, but might have been misguided depending on your personal feelings about it. But that he was a very sincere person who really wanted to make a difference in the world and really felt that he was doing the right thing in those circumstances. And other people may have disagreed with him. You know, there are a lot of different characters in this book, and they all sort of relate to him in different ways over the course of the story as it plays out. Some of them lose their faith. Some of them have their faith strengthened. Some of them, like Emma, are just stuck in this situation and are being carried along on this rapid current, and there's not much they can do about it. And he himself kind of shifts in the way he relates to the circumstances he's in over the course of the novel. So kind of an open-ended answer to that question, but indeed, yeah. How do you explain charisma? What even is it?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like, so I do have a performance background, and on a personal note, my mother is an extremely charismatic person. And as a child, having to go to the grocery store with her was excruciating, because I have literally watched men propose to her over apples. Like, where you're just like, what? I'm like 8 years old, and I'm like, I'm right here. Do you not see the gigantic diamond on her finger? Leave us alone. We have nothing to do. Do you know what cartoons I am missing right now? So it is fascinating to be near someone who has the charisma, because you don't necessarily, because you see them all the time, you don't necessarily have that, are under their spell all the time, because you see them in their down times. But yeah, to be near someone who is just draws in people, like like a moth to a flame. It is fascinating. I think you did a really great job on that, actually, because Emma does go back and forth. She does waver, and she does get pissed off, as I think any person would, when she thinks it's inappropriate, that their fascination with him is inappropriate. So, yeah, it is, and it's hard to say what it is, but what charisma is. But
Yeah.
we have a comment here from McCalligan. Some women of the past often needed to be more wily or enduring than strong, as we interpret it today. So good for you for conveying that.
Yeah, I agree, for sure.
Yeah. Actually, it reminds me of a quote from a million years ago. Also a million years ago when I was in an MFA program. My favorite author at the time was Sherman Alexie, and he was also another PNW person. And there was a quote from his writing professor from the MFA program at UW, and they said that he was not the best writer. He did not write the best stories, but what he had was endurance, that he could get the door shut in his face over and over and over and over and would keep on going. Whereas everybody else, the better writers, the better storytellers, gave up because they just didn't have that resilience that he had. And it just reminds me of the resilience is really what it just makes me think of. Oh, and another comment here. Thanks, Catherine here, Catherine Pritchett. It reminds me of what people would say about being in a room with Bill Clinton, that he like you were the only person in the room.
Yeah, I think it's very much like that. I think that's probably very much what Joseph Smith was like in person. In fact, he actually ran for president. Although I did not include that in the book because it was just one of those things that I just couldn't, it was too much to put in. But there's a whole fascinating nonfiction book that just came out about that called Joseph Smith for President. I encourage everyone to check it out. It's really good. So yeah.
Wow. So, because you grew up in the Mormon faith, obviously that influenced your writing on this. So, were there any points that made you struggle, like when writing this? Were there any like real world repercussions you were worried about, or were there any sticking points that you just didn't want to cover in the history?
No, I was very comfortable with covering all of it. And I think that's partly because it's been a while since I left the church, so I don't have any lingering feelings of like, oh, I don't want to upset anyone. But it's also because I feel like I did a really fair job of representing all the people in this history. Like, no one's a bad guy in this, no one's a good guy. It's just sort of lays out the historical facts, albeit in a fictional form, so it has those like robust characters and interesting, plot points that you can connect to. But it just goes through the actual history, and I feel there's not a whole lot that anybody can object to on grounds of like, oh, but this is a misrepresentation of X, Y, or Z. I mean, everybody in this book is just a person doing what they have to do in their situation, in their, these circumstances that they find themselves in, including Joseph. Like, I don't represent him as like this conniving schemer or like a creepy guy who's creeping on all the girls, It's just, he's not like a villain in this. He's certainly Emma's antagonist, and she's his antagonist at certain points.
She gives it back to him a couple times. That she does.
Yeah. She gives as good as she gets, for sure. But I didn't feel like I did anything offensive with this, especially having a grounding in the religion myself and having grown up in it. I don't feel that I'm being offensive with this book. I'm sure there are still some people who will feel it's offensive anyway, simply because I don't represent anything as supernatural in it. I'm not out here, I don't give a depiction of the first vision. I don't show the golden plates or anything like that, because it's all very human and all very plausible and not supernatural at all. I think there are some people who might potentially feel that I didn't represent the founding story of Mormonism fairly in that regard, but I think I did represent it fairly because, to myself, a non-religious person, the human story is the real story to me. It doesn't have anything to do with, a vision someone might have had or any spiritual experiences they necessarily had. Those things can be very important on a personal level. But I was interested in representing all these ordinary aspects of the founding of the church, and I feel I did that in a very fair and balanced way. So I feel good about it. We'll see what happens on March 1st. I don't know.
We'll see. I did, when I was searching for a graphic representation of the book, just need to pop in here. I did find it on a Christian fiction website, and that was the first thing that came up. And I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, my publisher did that, and I mean, I guess technically it's Christian fiction. I'm not sure if people who normally read specifically like Christian fiction are going to feel that it fits well with their genre, but okay.
I really would not put it in the same, I would not put it in the same category as something that comes out from like Bethany House or something like that.
Or like Deseret Books, like the LDS fiction publisher. I know. Yeah. No, it's squarely literary fiction. It is in the literary fiction camp, right in the center of it.
Yeah. Which probably from a HarperCollins standpoint makes it far more sellable, I guess, if that's the word for it.
I suppose, but then they went and stuck it in that Christian distribution catalog too. So, I mean, I don't know. Presumably they know what they're doing with that. I don't know.
Yeah, like you said, we'll find out March 1st when that happens.
We'll see.
I am going to pop it up here on screen just one more time so you can see what it looks like. So if you guys see that cover popping around.
There she is, looking at you.
Yep. Interesting. So I had a question. Sorry, it just fell out of my head. I have one more for you.
It's all right. It'll come back to you.
Yeah, sorry. Sometimes the long COVID still gets me.
That's okay.
It's like Swiss cheese over here. That's what, now I remember. Because you've got another book coming out, October 2022. Yeah. I didn't grab a graphic of this one, but tell us more about that one too.
Yeah, so just as I got sick of writing ancient Egyptian fiction, I am now getting a little sick of writing Mormon fiction, because this is also another Mormon historical novel. It's called The Fire and the Ore. It's another one that's under my Olivia Hawker pen name, so it's for Lake Union Publishing. And so kind of my shtick with Lake Union, aside from writing as Olivia Hawker for them, so far all of my books for them have been based on my family history. So it's like stories I've found in my family tree. And this one is no exception. So this is about some of my Mormon ancestors and how they ended up in the Salt Lake Valley, how they got there. One of them was involved in an overland expedition, shall we say, affectionately known as the Martin Handcart disaster. So that's promising. And so after she ended up arriving in the valley, she finds herself the second of 3 wives in a marriage. And the third wife was actually my direct ancestor. So it's this woman who was in the Martin Handcart party, and also this third wife in this marriage who is my third great grandmother, and how they ended up becoming the second and third wives of this particular man, and their relationship with his first wife. And then as the story progresses, the United States Army decides to invade Utah because the Mormons are doing crazy things, as the Mormons do. So President Buchanan thought it would be a swell idea to send the army over to menace a bunch of United States citizens. That went as well as you expect. But the result of that was that the people who lived in the cities and little settlements around Salt Lake had to flee into the wilderness to escape this invading army. So these 3 wives who now have to learn how to live together as sister wives, all of a sudden, surprise, all have to go live in the wilderness together now too, and survive together. So it ended up being a really cool story as I was reading through the family journals and stuff of people's recollections from when this happened. I was like, oh, this is a great story, I gotta write this one too. So yeah, as soon as I told my publisher about, hey, I found this other story in my family history, it's Mormons and they're doing all this sister wife stuff in the wilderness, they were like, yes, give us that book now. So I wrote that book. Yeah,
it kind of pairs in with the glove maker's wife that came a couple years ago. So that's kind of the same time period: Mormon, wilderness, Utah, army.
It was the same, yeah, the Utah War. So it's the same kind of incident that is central in that book as well. But yeah, so I did that one for Lake Union. It's called The Fire and the Ore. It comes out October 11th. It was a lot of fun to write. It was so fun to just like dive into all these journals and like read about the Martin Handcart Party and what an absolute disaster it was. Indeed, it was a well named disaster. It certainly was that. And yeah, it was really fun to write. And already my publisher is like, hey, we sure would love a novel about this other character. And I'm like, okay, but I don't know if I want to just go on writing Mormon fiction until I drop dead. So we'll talk about it. We'll see how it goes.
As Margaret says, don't fence me in. It's the anthem of the historical novelist who's perpetually curious.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, and she also says that she hasn't found anything like that in her family coffers. Lots of photos, but no explanations. Those family journals are just cool.
Yeah, they're wonderful. Yeah.
I gotta say, I have in the back of my head my own family history novel that I've been wanting to write. I started it many years ago, but it's unwieldy because there is not, the beautiful arc, that you get in fiction, and having to force it into that specific shape has been really challenging. I don't quite know how to do it.
Yeah, you got to kind of tease it out. Sometimes you have to fudge the details a little bit in service of story, but we're writing fiction. We're not writing biography or historia. We are writing fiction, so anything goes, technically.
Well, I gotta say, there's always the so-and-so's wife genre. It seems to be,
Yep.
I mean, the prophet's wife technically goes into it because...
Does. I'm not thrilled. I don't love the title. It had a different title originally. My publisher convinced me that it would be expedient to change the title, and I gave ground on that so that I could stand my ground on things inside the book that I wanted to keep that I knew they would try to make me change. So I was like, all right, I will play the game here, and I'll let you change the title, but only so I can use that as leverage later to say, no, I'm not changing this. You already made me change the title. I'm not changing the character of my book. So
I would love to know your different experience of self-publishing where no one's going to tell you what to do because you're the one who's push and publish, versus working with either Lake Union or HarperCollins, like where they have a little bit of control and they can always say, nope, we're not going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they can't technically say you have to do X, Y, unless they put that in the contract, and they don't usually put that in the contract. But they know their business pretty well, So if they're saying, look, we've got all this data that shows that this type of title tends to sell really well, and you want to sell a lot of books, right? Like, you gotta be willing to compromise a little bit, and you have to be willing to take their advice about certain things because they're right. Probably The Prophet's Wife will be a very lucrative title. It will probably be very effective in terms of moving units, and that's their primary concern. So I was like, okay, I mean, yeah, I can see that. You gotta listen to their advice because they are professionals and they know this business really well. But you also I find you have to have a clear vision for your own book as well, and you have to know what you're not willing to compromise on and what you are willing to compromise on. You have to be willing to compromise on some stuff, and you have to also know where your line is to say, I'm not gonna compromise on this. Yeah, like Margaret said, pick your battles. Yeah, exactly. And I knew going in that one of the things that I was going to be that we were going to have conversations about potentially changing was the inclusion of folk magic and occult ritual in this book. And I knew going in I was not going to change that because for me personally, that was the point of the book. My whole purpose in writing this book was to show that Mormonism is a unique American culture that is actually a syncretism between Christianity and Hermetic ritual magic. It's a unique combination that you don't find anywhere else in anthropology and human culture. And I wanted to show that, and I wanted to show how it influenced the formation the religion during the early years as Joseph Smith was developing it and as the church was growing. So I was like, that is my line. I'm not changing this about it. I'll change all these other things. And I did. I changed a lot of stuff in that book. Like I said, I took 25,000 words out of it for them. But I was like, this will stay. So,
well, and that was really fascinating, especially early in the book with the peep stones and and at some point you also do kind of discuss certain sects speaking in tongues and things like that. So I mean it was pretty interesting. And Rebecca wants to know what the original title was. So what was your choice of a title?
The original title was The Restoration of All Things. Yeah. Much more literary title. And that was the conversation we had. I was like, but this is a literary novel, and if I put a really commercial title on it, like The Prophet's Wife, is that going to sell it to the wrong kind of audience who's going to expect a commercial book, and then they're going to get hit with this like Wolf Hall-esque super literary thing? Like, is that wise or not? So we did have some interesting conversations about it, and I listened with an open mind, and I came to the conclusion that it would probably be a wise business decision to change the title, even if it was not the artistic decision I wanted to make. So
that's a really interesting point too. And I think your background with the self-publishing really gave you the perspective on that of what sells versus finding your readership.
Yeah, it did. And my editor, Tessa, who's a genius with historical fiction, she's been behind some of the biggest bestsellers in historical fiction over the past several years. So I was like, I would be a ding dong if I didn't listen to Tessa Woodward's opinion on this, right? Like, duh. You have a chance to work with the biggest editor in historical fiction. Like, why would you not take some of her suggestions at least, right? So we had a good conversation about it. And I was like, Tessa, this is my concern. And she was like, I understand your concern, but I think the book's going to get a reputation by word of mouth for being highly literary, and then I think the smartest combination is super commercial packaging and then just let it be literary quietly on the back end, and it's just going to get, people who love literary fiction are going to be like, oh, you have to read The Prophet's Wife. So I was like, okay, I'll trust you on this. You've seen a lot of books, so.
A lot. Well, so I mean, I worked as an independent bookseller for many years, a couple different bookstores, and hand selling. I was a bookseller during the Ahab's wife.
Yes.
The initial surge of the wives.
Yes.
It was easy to sell anything that had so and so's wife in the title, because beautiful cover, paperback. Here you go, and they flew out the door. It was pretty striking, actually. I was surprised.
Yeah.
Anna says, if I remember right, at the HM talk, you were talking about designing covers for other people. Is this happening, or was I just dreaming?
Well, it's something I said I was considering maybe doing, and I'm still thinking about it, but it's nothing I'm doing yet. And I still don't know if I will. We'll see. We'll see.
And Margaret says that I think the cover design leans literary for The Prophet's Wife, so you're hedging successfully.
Thank you. And that was something that was another thing where I knew I was not going to compromise, which was that I wanted the cover to have a very particular look and feel. And the initial cover designs were too commercial again. And I was like, no, like I raised a big stink. I mean, in a polite way, but I was like, look, guys, we already put a super, super commercial title on this. If we put a super cover on it too, it's going to sell the book to the wrong crowd. So it has to have a very literary feeling cover. It has to be more literary. And I actually told them, make it look like Hamnet. I was like, give it Hamnet for a cover and I'll be happy. And they came back with basically that design, but with a slightly different image originally. I was like, yes, perfect. Let's do it. So, yeah.
See, yeah. Well, I gotta say, it would be very tempting to put the woman facing away and some like fields of wheat or something. I can definitely see giving that attempt on it.
But I love this cover though. I love what they came up with, because you can see her eyes are looking out. She sees everything, but her mouth is covered, so she's not allowed to speak. Right? I love the thought it conveys just visually. I just think they did a great job with it. So yeah, super excited about the cover.
No, it's a really good one. And Margaret is just she's in your corner.
Thank you, Margaret.
Well, we should probably wrap things up because we are getting close to an hour, and I know that we could talk for probably days at a time, and given enough
Yes.
because there's lots to talk about. But thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for letting me read The Prophet's Wife ahead of time. That was a lovely experience, and good luck March 1st.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful to be here to talk to you all. So, yeah.
Yeah, and everybody says thank you.
Yay. Thank you, Linda. Hi, Linda.
All right. So, you guys, that was an awesome, awesome interview. And I want to let you guys know about other things that we have coming up next. Next up, you can always come chat with us on Instagram at Paper Lantern Writers. Every third Wednesday, this is going to be Wednesday, February 16th, we are going to be talking about new releases. So 2022 books we can't wait to read. And I'm sure that someone's going to pop up and talk about Libby's book fair. I guess I can't talk about it because I've already read it. And then next month, we have Lisa C. on March 6th. So tune in again here, same bat time, same bat channel. And we're going to talk to Lisa C., author of The Island of the Sea Women, which if you haven't read, you should absolutely read before that talk because it is going to be fabulous. I'm very excited about it. And you guys, if you need to, you can always subscribe here on the YouTube channel. You can join our Facebook group, Shine. And if you want to follow Libby, you can find her at hawkerbooks.com, and you can also follow her on her Instagram, which is the most, she said it was the place that she really basically goes to talk. So at Libbie Hawker on Instagram. And you can always follow us, Twitter, at writers_paper, Instagram, at Paper Lantern Writers, and of course, at our Facebook group, Shine. And if you do that, then you always see all the afternoon tea lights that come up. So have a lovely, lovely month. And I will see you next time with Lisa C.